Okay, this first problem, you have a right triangle and we're trying to solve for two different sides on it. I called this side X and this side Y. Later on in the class you'll understand why I'm doing that. But they gave us the hypotenuse side and we're looking for the two legs, and they said that the angle was 70 degrees. And a couple general things about triangles. The bigger this angle gets, the bigger the side Y is going to be, and the smaller the side X is going to be. You guys probably know the a squared plus b squared is c squared thing, but it also turns out that in math there's a special way that you can use both this information along with that information to always figure out these other pieces of information, the sides over here. And in physics, we're going to have to do that a lot. We're going to have to take this hypotenuse and break it down into these pieces. You'll see that later on in the class. So what I've done to solve this is I've used what are called trig functions, if you guys haven't seen that before. It's just a special button in your calculator that knows, based on the angle, how big the other side's going to be. And the two that we're going to need in this class are sine and cosine. So the way that I'd like you to do it, which might be different from what you learned in math class, is just run it with both sine and cosine. Take this hypotenuse and multiply it by sine of 70 and multiply it by cosine of 70 and just write down what those two numbers are. And it turns out that each one of these is going to belong to either x or y. Now, just looking at this problem, all that's left to figure out is which one is supposed to be bigger, x or y. Well, check it out. The y has the 70-degree side, and hopefully you guys know that the x over here has the 20-degree side. So this side is going to be much stronger than that side, which means that the 5.1 is going to belong to the x, and the 14.1 belongs to the y. So what this is really saying is if I were to walk 5.1 miles east and then 14.1 miles north, then the distance I am from where I started to where I finished, if I were to draw a line from, like, let's say you started at point A, and then you walked to point B, and then you walked to point C, and I want to know, well, how far is it just straight from A to C? The number would be 15 if you walked 5.1 to the right and 14.1 up. And in physics, that's very important because not everything's going to happen in a straight line. And we're going to have to use these trig tools in order to calculate this stuff. So all you got to do is just run sine and cosine and decide which one to use. It takes a lot less brain muscle than probably how you did it in math class. Problem number 2, you've got x squared plus 3x minus 7 equals 0, where you're trying to solve for x. This is tougher than just usual equations because you have an x squared and an x, so we can't isolate the x very easily. Instead, we've got to go to the quadratic formula. Anytime you've got an x squared and you're looking for an x, this is usually what you're going to want to do. And in this class, the problems are always going to be too complicated to just factor them. You're always going to need the quadratic formula. Now, the first thing before you run the quadratic formula is you have to identify a, b, and c. So when you have all this stuff set equal to 0, a is the coefficient in front of the x squared. In this case, it's 1. B is the number in front of the x. And c is the number in front of, well, it's just a number. By the way, don't forget the negative on this thing. Just because the minus is there, c is negative 7 here. So here's the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula, minus b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac over 2a. It is critical that you know this in this class. And you're going to just have to have that in your head for the homework quiz this week. So if I plug those numbers in, plugging the stuff in, we end up with these two solutions for x. So go ahead and pause the video and check that stuff. For this last one, we're given an equation where we need to solve for x and y, which is weird, but we can do it because we're given extra information. We're given two equations. In physics, I don't want you to use any of the complicated elimination stuff, and certainly don't turn to your graphing calculator because you're too smart for that stuff. Here's how I'd like you to solve it in this class. So first of all, hopefully, if you're good at algebra, you recognize that this entire thing was divisible by 2. And if you do that, that simplifies things. So instead, you get y equals 2x plus 3. And if you have y by yourself, then over here, where there was a y, we get to write a 2x plus 3. And once we wrote that instead of y, it's very easy to solve. You get x equals 1 and plug it in to get y. And you get y is 5.